Nathan Cole had been filling out the adoption paperwork for 6 weeks. He had been told, each time he called, that the file was under review. The process took time, his application was in the queue, someone would be in touch. He had called 7 times. He had left 4 messages. He had submitted 3 documentation packets. Because each time there was a different reason the current packet was insufficient. On the 6th week, he called on a Tuesday and the phone rang 12 times and no one answered. Thursday, a certified letter arrived. It informed him that MWDK 291, German Shepherd, male, 8 years, had been placed with an approved adopter and was no longer available. Nathan read the letter standing at his mailbox. He read it twice. He went inside and sat at the kitchen table and did not move for a long time. Rex had been his dog for 5 years, 3 deployments, Helmand Province, Kandahar, and the mountain road in Kunar Province in 2019, where the truck went off the embankment and Rex had pulled Nathan's arm until Nathan got out of the vehicle and then stood between Nathan and the burning wreckage and refused to move. Nathan had a scar on his left forearm from that night. The dog's grip, applied with exactly the force required and not 1 pound more. He had kept the scar. He considered it an accurate record. He found the listing 9 days later. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. What Nathan found at that house is something we have never told on this channel before. Stay with us until the very end. We read every single comment, and we are grateful for every one of you. Nathan Cole was 36 years old and had the build of someone who had been doing difficult physical work since he was 20 and had never seen a reason to stop. He was 6'2" and solid without being heavy, with dark hair cut close, and the kind of face that had been outdoors in hard weather long enough to make the weathering look like character. His eyes were a deep, steady brown, warm in the way that good things in the world are warm, but with a quality underneath the warmth that people occasionally found difficult to name, and that was, in the accurate sense, the quality of someone who has been present for terrible things and has not looked away from any of them. He had been a senior chief petty officer with SEAL Team 5 for 11 years, 3 deployments to Afghanistan, Helmand in 2016, Kandahar in 2018, Kunar in 2019, which was the last one, because the accident on the mountain road had done things to his left knee that 2 surgeries had addressed and 1 final medical evaluation had adjudicated. He had retired on a pension at 34 and had moved to a house in Logan, Utah with 4 acres and a view of the Wasatch Front and no particular plan beyond the plan, which was to figure out what came next. What he had intended to come next, from the moment his retirement paperwork was filed, was Rex. He had not been Rex's original handler, that had been a petty officer named Marcus Webb who had separated in 2020 and who had attempted his own adoption process, which had also stalled, which had also produced a series of insufficient packet notifications, which had also ended in a certified letter. Webb had called Nathan in October from Boise to tell him what had happened, and Nathan had filed his own application the following week, because the 2 of them had agreed, without needing to discuss it extensively, that Rex was not going to end up somewhere that neither of them knew about. Except Rex had ended up somewhere that neither of them knew about. 9 days after the certified letter, Nathan was on his laptop at 11 at night. He had stopped sleeping at normal hours sometime in 2019 and had not fully recovered the habit, and he was on a working dog forum because he had spent 9 days on every platform and forum and network he could find, looking for MWDK 291, looking for a German Shepherd answering Rex's description, looking for anything. He found a post in a regional German Shepherd owners group. Someone in Mill Creek, Utah, 22 miles from Nathan's house, had posted a photo of a dog they called Bear. The dog in the photo was a German Shepherd with a rich black and tan coat and a specific asymmetry in his ears, the right one slightly smaller at the tip. Clipped by a piece of debris during a vehicle clearance in Kandahar in 2018, and a way of sitting that was not the sit of a pet. It was the sit of a dog waiting for a command. Nathan knew that sit. He had seen it every day for 5 years. He found the poster's profile. The poster's name was Derek Colvin, and his profile said he lived in Mill Creek and worked in property development and had recently acquired a trained working shepherd that he described in a comment thread under the photo as an investment in home security. An investment in home security. Nathan stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he called Marcus Webb in Boise. Derek Colvin was 44 years old and had the handshake and manner of a man who had spent his career in environments where confidence was currency and had become so practiced at spending it that he sometimes forgot it wasn't wealth. He drove a vehicle that communicated a specific income bracket and lived in a house in Mill Creek that communicated it further, a large modern construction at the end of a private road, behind a gate that required a code, with a particular kind of landscaping that signals the landscape has been professionally managed and the owner has not spent much time in it. He had acquired Rex. He would not have known the dog's name was Rex through a contact he had developed at a veterans equipment resale operation in Salt Lake City, a man named Brandon Price, who had represented himself as a licensed broker of retired military working dogs and who had produced documentation that looked correct and that Colvin had not examined carefully because Colvin's interest in Rex was not in the documentation but in the appearance of ownership. A military-trained German Shepherd as a deterrent. A credential. Something that communicated that the property and the person were not to be approached casually. He had paid $4,000. The documentation was not correct. Price was not a licensed broker of anything. The chain of custody from the military working dog program to Price to Colvin had involved 3 separate fraudulent transfers, each of which had used forms that resembled the authentic program forms and that had passed inspection by people who had not been looking carefully and did not have reason to. The total pathway from MWDK 291's certified letter notification to Derek Colvin's gate-coded driveway had taken 11 days and had involved, in addition to the fraudulent forms, a payment of $800 to a program office administrative employee named Gareth Moss, who had been supplementing his salary in this manner for 3 years. Rex had been inside Colvin's house for 17 days when Nathan found the forum post. He had been there for 19 when Nathan drove to Mill Creek. He did not go alone. He went with Marcus Webb, who had driven from Boise the night before, and with a retired JAG officer named Patricia Solis, who had been referred to Nathan by a veterans legal network in Salt Lake City, and who had spent the previous 36 hours preparing a formal declaration of the fraudulent transfer for submission to the appropriate federal authority, and with a Wasatch County Sheriff's deputy named Hendricks, who had been briefed by Solis and who had agreed, on the basis of the documentation she had prepared, that there was sufficient probable cause to accompany the group and to observe whatever they found. Nathan had spent those 19 days the way he had spent the worst 24 hours of deployments, moving through the tasks, making the calls, building the case, because building the case was what he knew how to do, and because the alternative was the specific, unproductive despair of a man who is not able to act. And he was able to act, and he had acted. He was still the thing that the other side of this situation had not fully accounted for. He rang the bell at Derek Colvin's gate at 9:17 on a Saturday morning. Colvin answered through the intercom with the specific, irritable authority of a man who had not been expecting anyone and had decided this gave him standing to be difficult about it. Nathan identified himself by name and said he was there with a deputy of the Wasatch County Sheriff's Department and requested entry. The phrasing was not aggressive and it was not a request. It had the quality that things have when the person saying them has done the assessment and knows exactly how the next 10 minutes will go. Colvin opened the gate. He came to the front door with his hands in the pockets of a bathrobe that was more expensive than Nathan's truck payment, and an expression that had been assembled for managing situations from a position of authority. He looked at Nathan. He looked at Marcus. He looked at Deputy Hendricks. He looked at Patricia Solis, who was holding a folder that was thicker than he had expected, and something in his expression did a small but visible recalibration. Nathan said, "I'd like to see the dog." Colvin said, "I'm not sure what this is about." Nathan looked at him. He did not hurry what he was about to say, because hurrying would have been a misuse of the moment. "The German Shepherd you acquired 19 days ago," Nathan said, "through Brandon Price. His name is Rex. He is a retired military working dog who was illegally transferred out of the federal adoption program. I am his designated handler, and I have been his handler for 5 years. Deputy Hendricks is here because the transfer constitutes a federal violation and a Utah state property crime, and because Miss Solis has filed the supporting documentation with both the relevant federal authority and the county sheriff's office." He paused. "I'd like to see Rex." Colvin's mouth opened. He closed it. He looked at Hendricks, who looked back at him with the calm, steady patience of a man who is in no hurry and whose presence communicates that this is not a conversation with a negotiable outcome. "He's in the yard," Colvin said. Nathan walked past him. The yard was large and well kept, the specific expensive green of irrigated grass in Utah, with a fence at the perimeter and a view of the Wasatch Front to the east that on a clear morning in November was the kind of view that justified a gate code. Rex was at the far edge of the yard, at the fence line. He was sitting. He was sitting in the way he sat, not as a dog at rest, but as a dog at post, facing outward, monitoring the perimeter he had been placed next to, doing the job he understood how to do in the absence of a command telling him to do otherwise. Nathan stopped. He did not call out immediately. He stood for a moment and looked at the dog at the far fence, the black and tan coat, the asymmetric ears, the specific, locked-in attention of a dog who had learned to hold a position until the order changed. And he felt something move through him that he did not try to name or manage. Then he said, in a voice pitched to carry across the yard without urgency, in the specific tone that Rex had been responding to for 5 years, "Rex." Here the dog turned. He did not run. He stood, oriented, and then came toward Nathan at a trot. Not the exuberant trot of a dog reuniting with a stranger who has done something kind, but the deliberate, ground-covering trot of a dog who has been given an order he recognizes from a voice he knows and is executing it with the focused, complete attention that had kept both of them alive on a mountain road in Kunar Province in 2019. He came to Nathan's left side. He sat. He looked up. Nathan put his hand on the dog's head. It took him a moment before he could say anything. When he did, it was one word, very quiet. The word that means the mission is over and the position is released, and what comes next is whatever comes next. "Good," he said. Marcus Webb was standing at the edge of the patio. He had both hands in his coat pockets, and he was looking at the Wasatch Front, which was something to look at. Brandon Price was charged by federal prosecutors with 4 counts of fraudulent appropriation of military property, 3 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of bribery of a government employee in connection with the payment to Gareth Moss. Moss was charged separately with 1 count of theft of government property and 1 count of bribery, and negotiated a plea that included full cooperation with the investigation into the extent of the scheme, which expanded over the following 8 weeks to identify 6 additional fraudulent transfers over 3 years. 6 additional military working dogs. 4 of them were located. 3 were returned to former handlers through proper adoption channels. 1, a 6-year-old Belgian Malinois named Drake, whose handler had been killed in service, was placed with a veterans K9 therapy program in Salt Lake City, where the program director told Nathan when he called to follow up, he was working with veterans who had traumatic brain injuries and doing it, she said, as if he had been built for exactly this. Derek Colvin was not charged. He had purchased in good faith from a fraudulent broker, and the documentation, while fraudulent, had been sufficiently convincing that the investigators declined to pursue him. He had surrendered Rex without further resistance on the morning of the visit, which Nathan suspected had less to do with good faith than with the calculation, made quickly in a bathrobe at a front door. That resistance was not in his interest. Nathan did not require him to be charged. He required Rex back. He had Rex back. Gareth Moss received 14 months in federal prison. Brandon Price received 3 years. The program office, which conducted its own internal review following the investigation, identified the administrative process gap that Price had exploited and restructured the notification and transfer protocols in a way that, the coordinator told Nathan in a phone call, should have been in place years ago. Should have been. Nathan did not say anything in response to that. He was, by the time the investigation completed its public documentation in late spring, living in the house in Logan with Rex on the porch and the view of the Wasatch Front and a new fence line he had built with Marcus Webb over 2 weekends in April. The two of them working the posts in the specific companionable silence of people who have been through something together and have arrived at the other side of it and do not need to discuss it further. Marcus had driven from Boise for both weekends. He had stayed in the spare room. Rex had regarded him with a particular German Shepherd assessment that takes approximately 15 seconds and conveys a verdict, and the verdict had been favorable, and Rex had spent both evenings lying between the two of them on the porch in the specific, distributed contentment of a dog who has surveyed the situation and found it correct. 6 months after the Saturday morning at Colvin's gate, Nathan Cole was on the porch of his house in Logan as the Wasatch Front turned the specific color it turns in October. The amber and rust of scrub oak across the upper slopes, the dark green of the pines, the long shadow of the ridge falling east in the late afternoon. The air was cold enough to be honest about it. He had a cup of coffee, the good kind, the kind he made on weekend mornings, and that had become a reason to get up when other reasons were organizing themselves more slowly. Rex was in the yard. He was working the perimeter. This was the morning routine, a systematic circuit of the fence line, nose down, ears rotating, amber eyes tracking the world with the focused, professional attention of a dog who considers the perimeter his responsibility and takes the responsibility seriously. He covered the ground with the same ground covering efficiency that had covered the mountain roads and the compound clearances and the specific terrible embankment in Kunar in 2019, and he covered it now the same way, because he was the same dog, and the same dog does not learn a different way of working just because the stakes are lower. The stakes were not lower. To Rex, the perimeter was the perimeter. It deserved the same attention. He completed the circuit and came back to the porch at a trot and up the steps, 3 of them, he knew these steps, and sat beside Nathan's chair and pressed his flank against Nathan's leg and looked out at the view. Nathan put his hand on Rex's back. The thick, warm fur. The specific ridge along the spine that he had found by feel in the dark on a mountain road in 2019. Good boy, he said. Rex's tail moved. Once certain, he did not need more than that. Nathan did not need more than that. The Wasatch Front was doing what it did in October, and the coffee was warm, and the fence was straight, and the 6 additional dogs had been found, and the one who had been built for the therapy work was doing it in Salt Lake City, and Marcus Webb was coming again in November. That was enough. That was what enough looked like, and Nathan Cole, who had spent the better part of 2 years learning what enough looked like, recognized it. Sometimes miracles don't arrive at the hour we believe we have earned them. Sometimes they make us wait 6 weeks of phone calls and 7 unreturned messages and a certified letter at a mailbox, so that when the morning comes, the Saturday morning in November, the drive to Mill Creek, the voice across a yard, we understand the full weight of what we have been given. Sometimes God does not protect us from the systems that fail us. He gives us the patience to work through them, and the people who work alongside us, and the particular kind of stubborn courage that refuses to accept that what belongs to someone should be taken from them without a fight. Nathan Cole did not lose his temper in that yard. He did not lose his composure at that gate. He stood in the cold and said, "I'd like to see Rex." And that was enough, because he had done the work that made it enough, and because the work is always where the miracle lives. The bond between a man and his dog is one of the oldest things in the human story. It does not require explanation. It does not require a certificate or a queue position or a sufficient documentation packet. It requires only the refusal to stop looking, the particular faith that what belongs together will find its way back together if the person who knows it will simply not give up and keep going. Keep going. If Nathan and Rex's story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to know that what belongs together finds its way back. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And tell us, have you ever refused to stop looking for something that mattered? Your story might be the one that carries someone through today. If you believe in stories of loyalty, perseverance, and the quiet faithfulness of God working through ordinary determination, please subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. May God bless you, protect your family, and remind you always that the things that belong together are never truly lost to each other. Keep looking. Keep going. Don't stop.